Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a highly charged and pretty complex event. We are going to objectively break down a very specific source that presents an intense, highly critical narrative of the recent Jantar Mantar protests in India. This source describes a confrontational protest centered around the NEET exam controversies, and it levels some incredibly severe allegations against the government and police forces. Now, our goal today isn't to take a side, but to structurally map out exactly what this source claims happened, step by step.
To make sense of it all, we've broken the source's narrative into 4 parts. First, the origins of the NEET protest. Second, signs of alleged sabotage. Third, the July 20th crackdown. And finally, the nationwide momentum and fallout.
So, Part 1. The NEET protest origins, from sit-in to hunger strike.
According to our source, this whole thing kicked off on June 20th. The Cockroach Janta Party, alongside thousands of students, set up a sit-in with one very specific primary demand: the immediate resignation of India's Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan. The catalyst for all this? Widespread allegations of controversies and compromised integrity surrounding the national NEET medical exams. These students felt like their futures were literally being played with, and they wanted accountability right at the very top.
Tracking the timeline of events from June 20th onward, the creator really emphasizes that the movement was 100% nonviolent. In fact, they note that early on, protesters and police were actually having totally friendly interactions. But the momentum really shifted gear on June 28th. That's when activist Sonam Wangchuk joined in and started an indefinite hunger strike. Fast forward to July 17th. As Wangchuk lost significant weight and his health visibly failed, those images spread like wildfire online, and support for the students surged across the entire country.
Which brings us to Part 2, signs of alleged sabotage. The source's claims of a sinister plan.
Right as that national sympathy was peaking, the narrative in our source takes a pretty dark turn. They allege a coordinated, behind-the-scenes effort orchestrated by authorities to undermine the peaceful movement. The first major red flags? Sudden, high-level administrative shakeups. On July 17th, Delhi Police Commissioner Satish Golcha was abruptly yanked from his post, despite being literally months away from retirement. He was instantly swapped out for Anurag Kumar, a special director from the Intelligence Bureau. Then, the very next morning at 6:30 a.m., when the crowds were super thin, police allegedly raided the stage. They forced the detention of activist Sonam Wangchuk and moved him to a hospital completely against the protesters' wishes. Why the sudden change in leadership? Well, the source strongly implies the old commissioner got the boot simply because he refused to take these kinds of aggressive actions against a peaceful crowd.
The source uses the events of that next morning to really hammer home its core argument of a deliberate government setup. Think about it. With a massive, highly publicized protest march on the books, you totally expect a beefed-up security presence, right? But the source claims the exact opposite happened. Overnight, Delhi police allegedly systematically dismantled and removed all metal detectors and security checks from Jantar Mantar. Stripping away that security left the area completely wide open, which the protesters immediately flagged as a highly suspicious move.
So why pull the security? Well, according to the source, it was to clear the path for planted evidence. Protesters claimed that under the cover of darkness, a damaged van and a truck loaded with bricks and stones were mysteriously parked right next to the protest site. And here is the kicker. The source points out that these roads were heavily barricaded by police. Absolutely no vehicle was getting in there without explicit police clearance. So the creator argues these items were deliberately prepositioned by authorities. The ultimate goal? To eventually discredit this non-violent movement and frame it as a violent riot. Unpacking claims like this is absolutely crucial for understanding how opposing narratives are built during major political standoffs.
All right, Part 3. The July 20th crackdown, a multi-tiered suppression.
This brings us to the morning of the planned mega march, and what the source describes as an intense, coordinated government crackdown. The explainer lays out a multi-pronged suppression strategy meant to totally isolate the protesters. First, they slapped down Section 163, making it illegal for more than 5 people to gather. Then, authorities threw up these massive 10-foot iron barricades, and they even went as far as welding them together. To choke off the crowds, 5 key metro stations were shut down completely. And to put a lid on communication and live streaming, the government allegedly triggered severe internet shutdowns across 150 different sites in central Delhi.
But despite this absolute fortress of blockades, massive crowds still managed to push toward Parliament Street. And the police response, according to our source, was an extreme escalation. The claim here is that at least 25 tear gas bullets were fired in rapid succession directly at unarmed citizens, including people who were quite literally just standing or sitting there peacefully.
And the allegations of excessive force get much, much heavier from here. The source claims authorities launched unprovoked baton charges into the crowd of students. Even wilder, it states the police deliberately hid their uniform nameplates, masked their faces with handkerchiefs, and actually let plainclothes individuals violently attack protesters right alongside them. The video's creator goes as far as to compare this behavior to quote-unquote terrorists rather than law enforcement. Even ground journalists who were just there trying to document the chaos, names like Shyam Mira Singh and Ramit Verma, were allegedly subjected to brutal physical violence to kill the story.
The source really highlights the human cost of all this through desperate pleas from the ground. Listen to this. Medical professionals claimed they were physically beaten by the police while they were just trying to administer first aid to injured students. One direct quote says, "We are doctors. We came to help you. We didn't even say a word." It paints this really grim picture of a police force that had entirely thrown protocol out the window, refusing to let even doctors help the wounded. This is exactly why analyzing sources like this matters. It helps us grasp how institutional actions are actually perceived and felt on the ground during intense democratic protests.
Now you might be wondering, where were the protest leaders during all of this? Well, the creator argues the government used superficial political meetings as a giant distraction tactic, while the Cockroach Janta Party spokesperson, Saurav Das, was being bounced around endless bureaucratic waiting rooms, eventually just getting a dismissive 10-minute chat with Health Minister JP Nadda. The reality on the ground was that the crowd was intentionally left without leadership. And taking full advantage of that isolation, the police allegedly moved in to aggressively sweep the area with batons.
Moving on to Part 4. Nationwide momentum and fallout, spreading beyond Delhi.
Despite these incredibly aggressive clearance tactics, the source emphasizes that the core ideology of this movement just couldn't be boxed in behind welded barricades. In fact, the crackdown allegedly backfired spectacularly by igniting nationwide momentum. Seeing students beaten in Delhi sparked instant outrage. We're talking students in Lucknow getting arrested by UP police, widespread detentions in Ahmedabad, and massive solidarity marches echoing through Kolkata, Mumbai, and even as far out as Arunachal Pradesh. Amazingly, the source notes that by that very same evening, the protesters in Delhi had actually marched right back and rebuilt their dismantled stage at Jantar Mantar.
Ultimately, this source serves as a severe, blistering critique of the current administration. The creator interprets this whole multi-tiered lockdown and the alleged use of excessive force as the frantic actions of an autocratic, scared leadership. By literally framing these events as a war against the country's youth and even comparing the government to the oppressive East India Company, the source defines this crackdown not as some standard security measure, but as a fundamental betrayal of democratic values.
So we leave you with this final, provocative thought derived from our breakdown today. If extreme suppression tactics and a flat-out refusal to hear the demands of students only serve to spark nationwide momentum, what is the ultimate cost to a nation's democratic stability? It's a heavy question for sure, and one the source insists history is going to answer. If this explainer added value to your life, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more self-improvement content. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.